and I come to High Oakham Primary School, and my daddy is a police officer, and I like it when Joe Wicks is Scooby-Doo.
Hi, my name is Lucy.
Hi, my name is William,
And we go to High Oakham Primary School.
And I like playing with the marbles one.
I like playing on the field with my friends.
And my daddy works at the police.
My mummy is a teacher.
Hi, I am Joshua and I go to High Oakham Primary School, and my dad is a key worker and my mum works for Boots and I love the field. Whoa.
Hello, I'm Charlotte and my parents both work for Nottinghamshire Police. My favourite thing that I've done at school so far is rounders.
Hi, I'm Leo and my mummy and daddy work for the ambulance services, paramedics. They take people to A&E when they've had an accident. I have been at school recently and my favourite thing has been weaving Eye of God. Here's a picture. That's all from me, and this message is to say stay home, stay safe.
Hi, my name is Ethan and this is my brother Johnson. My mum and dad work for the key workers of police force. Our favourite thing at High Oakham Primary School is rounders.
Thank you, County Council, for keeping us safe.
People, all the key workers who are working during this pandemic. Thank you, Mum and Dad and the school. My favourite thing is so I can play with my friends.
Me. Thank you for Miss Lowe and thank you for Miss Smith. And you had lots of fun with belly dancing and painting rocks.
Thank you for keeping our school open. Mr. Bancroft and the cleaners are all fab. I'll have a lot of special memories here.
Thank you to Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Pye, Mrs. Sheila, Mrs. Kayla. We've been painting, we've had ice cream, we've been outside and we've even had Easter eggs.
Thank you for letting us in the school while my mummy cooks the dinners. We made fairy gardens and we played on the bikes, and the teacher made it lots of fun and we made lots of new clothes.
My mummy and daddy work for the NHS. My mummy and daddy work for the NHS.
My mum and dad work for the NHS.
Our mum and dad work for the NHS.
My mum and dad are on the front line risking their own lives.
We want you to stay at home to help save lives.
We want to protect our family and would like you to protect yours.
This virus can kill anybody.
You may not have symptoms, but you could still be spreading the virus.
It's important to stay at home and help save lives.
I like my job, and I've been a mental health nurse for it's more than 40 years. I'm not going to give my age away. September last year, I was walking my dog and she happened to pick a fight with another dog. During that fight, I intervened and I was bitten by either of the dogs, I don't know which. As a consequence of that, I contracted sepsis with quite a virulent bacteria. Essentially, went into shock, lots of organ failure, and the result of all that is what they call a quad amputation. All of my life I've been very independent. I never felt as if I'd lose it. I always just thought, and I still do, it's something you're constantly working towards. My wife's the gardener, not me. I used to do the heavy jobs. You know, the carer thing is quite important. I think the big thing for Anne has always been, if I know the help's there and how to access it, then that makes me feel better already. When I was considered to be medically fit, before I was actually discharged, this rather nice man called Nadeem turned up, and he explained that he was the hospital social worker. He explained the concepts of social care. As soon as we started the assessment, it was obvious that we were also going in a direction.
What makes me proud about working within the hospital setting is having the opportunity to work with hospital OTs, physiotherapists, doctors, working with the individual to meet that individual's need collectively. Crucially, the individual is the heart of the work that we do.
The right services were put in place in a very caring way. Nadeem was the hub. Essentially, it did feel like a joined up approach.
I think Julian naturally is a confident man, and I think it was about trying to ensure that we harness that positivity that Julian has. The strategy offers us opportunity to work with individuals around their needs and promote their confidence and independence, and allows them structure and control to think about the services that they want and how they want to live independently within the community.
All the services that I need have been provided, and I feel well cared for. The difference that adult social care has made is the difference between being in an institution and being miserable and being at home and being happy.
My life was a bit of a struggle. I've always wanted to do things like be out and about, meeting new people. Basically, my head was all over the place.
I started working with Shane in May 2017. His social worker in the transitions team referred him to the Knots Enabling Service. I know that Knots Enabling Service have changed Shane's pathway for the better. His social worker told me that he was planning to commission 2 days of day services for Shane. And now what we have is someone who's happy with their life, working hard, getting paid, and for those other 5 days a week not being bored, sat at home.
Ever since me and Aidan have been talking, ever since I've called him my brother, he's shown me some good skills, he's a nice lad. I can't have no one better than him, because he's quality.
I quickly found out that Shane was very good with people and his social skills were great. He always makes me laugh. He wanted to do some gardening, and also he wanted to help people, which is why he did some volunteering at the community gardens. I increased a person's confidence by focusing on what strengths they do have, because I believe if you focus on things that interest someone, you're likely to get the best out of them.
I have the confidence to actually do something now in my life.
I'm proud that I've enabled someone to be able to do those things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do before, or believe that they could do. And I think that sums up what the Knots Enabling Service is about. We've changed someone's life for the better and actually made him more independent.
My passion is basically birds of prey. The best of all are my peregrines. Everything you've got is all based on a bond. If you haven't got that bond, you haven't got anything worth having. When I got told that I'd got dementia, I was told that it would gradually get worse, so it meant I had to get rid of my car. I got rid of quite a few of my falcons, what have you. Hardly anybody ever rings me up about falcons at all, see. You can't expect it to go on forever, but Anyway, it's finished with now. Mary and myself do everything that we can. We help one another. So we've said at times we'll have to have some help.
As an occupational therapist, I try to promote a person's independence. I always start off with a person-centred approach because we just want the best for the person. So I think that's quite a good thing as a therapist to work in a team that do actually promote that. When George initially came home from hospital, he did state that outdoor mobility was one of his goals.
I'd been in the house for a long time and I was quite pleased to be able to get out and have a walk. I says, I haven't been out for weeks.
From the very young age, when I was a child, I used to idealize my father. He was very fit and athletic, and he was a police officer, so he used to do exercise every day. I used to think, oh, one day I'm going to be like him. So keeping myself healthy and fit, that meant a lot for me. I contacted Nottinghamshire County Council Adult Access Service because it was recommended by my friend.
People normally get in contact by phoning the customer service centre. Information's gathered, then it's passed through to the Adult Access Service, who will then call back, have a conversation and establish the best way to assess somebody. Seema was invited to our clinic. She was very nervous, didn't know anything about equipment, and unfortunately she'd lost confidence trying to access her bathing facility. She stopped taking care of herself because she was scared.
Jane made me feel so valued because she was listening to me, and she was very good in picking where I was struggling, and she just focused on that.
I love my job. Helping people do their everyday living tasks, getting into your bathing facility. We take it for granted every day that, it's easy to do, and seeing someone with a big smile on their face once they've tried a simple piece of equipment that is going to give them that independence to get back is such a big achievement for both that person and for myself.
Without Jane, I would not have known that I can help myself. It changed my whole view of care and how I can make myself independent.
Originally, she was maybe thinking of carers, but with the simple provision of the shower board, it has promoted her independence, made the person happy and their life bearable again.
All my life I've liked to be with people. I used to work for British Home Stores. I used to be head cashier and, in charge of office there. I think that still rubs off on me here because I have to talk to everybody and interfere. My husband died when we were both 52, he had a heart attack. So I'd always looked after myself. And then I got to a time when all of a sudden it wasn't easy.
Planning and Licensing Committee, which is being held remotely, with the majority of the 13 members joining the meeting from their own homes. As well as myself, the other members present in the meeting today, and I'll announce them all rather than members individually announcing themselves. I've Councillor Pauline Allen, Councillor Richard Butler, Councillor Neil Clark, Councillor Jim Creamer, Councillor Sybil Fielding, Councillor Tony Harper, Councillor Paul Henshaw, Councillor John Longdon, Councillor Tracy Taylor, Councillor Keith and Councillor Andy Wetton. Councillor Rachel Madden may join us later in the meeting. We also have the following officers present today: Development Management Team Manager Jonathan Smith, Planning Officer David Marsh, Planning Officer Joel Marshall, Enforcement Officer Tim Turner, and Countryside Access Team Manager Neil Lewis, plus Rights of Way Officer Stephanie Locke, and our solicitor from Legal Services, Rachel Clack, plus of course the clerk to the meeting, Peter Barker. Welcome. Can I also welcome Councillor David Bagshaw from Eastwood Town Council, who may or may not have joined us at this point. If you have, David, welcome. David will be speaking in connection with the Walker Street application. I also welcome David Collins from VIA and Richard Brewer from NCC Property, who will also be speaking on that same item. This is the second virtual meeting of the Planning and Licensing Committee to be held in line with the new requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. So please do bear with us if we experience any technical issues. If we do lose any members from the call temporarily, then officers will seek to assist in getting them reconnected as soon as possible, hopefully without the need to halt proceedings. Officers will inform the meeting if they are unable to rectify the problem and if we need the meeting to be paused or adjourned temporarily. So if I can move on to the agenda, item 1 on your papers is to note the appointment by full council on the 11th of June 2020 of myself as chairman and Councillor Jim Creamer as vice chairman of the committee for the 2020-21 municipal year. I'd ask the committee to note the appointment. Fortunately for Councillor Creamer and myself, you don't get to vote on this. Moving on to agenda item 2 is to note the membership of the committee for the 2020-21 municipal year as follows: myself, Councillor Chris Barnfather, Councillor Jim Creamer, Councillor Pauline Allen, Councillor Andy Brown, Councillor Neil Clark MBE, Councillor Sybil Fielding, Councillor Tony Harper, Councillor Paul Henshaw, Councillor John Longdon, Councillor Rachel Madden, Councillor Tracy Taylor, Councillor Keith Walker and Councillor Andy Wetton. And again, I would ask the committee to note the membership of this committee for the forthcoming year. It is, of course, unchanged from last year. And again, no formal vote is required on this item. If we can move swiftly on then to the minutes of the last meeting, agenda item 3, please. The last meeting was held on the 2nd of June 2020. Unless any member has any issues that they wish to raise with those minutes, I'd ask that you agree them, and I'll take that no comment is an agreement. If anybody has a comment to make, then please indicate. But if there are no comments, I'll take that as an agreement and I will sign the minutes at the end of the meeting. Thank you. In that case, then, item 4 is apologies for absence. Mr. Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Butler replaces Councillor Brown for this meeting only. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker, and welcome, Councillor Butler. You are a regular attendee as a substitute, so you're almost a full member of this committee.
You're very welcome, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Moving on to item 5, declarations of interest by members and officers. Do any members or officers present have any discernible pecuniary interest to declare?
No.
No, thank you. And item B, do any members or officers present have any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare?
No.
Councillor Harper?
No.
Moving on then to item 6, declarations of lobbying. Do any members present have any instances of lobbying to declare?
Yes, I have, Chairman. Chairman?
Yes, would you like to enlighten us, Councillor Harper?
Yeah, I've been lobbied by Eastwood Town Council, Broxtowe Borough Council, including the leader, Milan Radulovic, resident Bob Charlesworth, and residents during a site visit in relation to Walker Street Junction.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. In relation to that item, will you be sitting as a member of the committee for that item, or will you be speaking on it as the divisional member?
I'll be speaking as the divisional member, Chairman.
So if we could record that, Mr. Barker, I'd be grateful. Thank you. In that case, then, if we can move on to the agenda itself, and I'm going to just alter the order of this slightly with your permission, in the fact that we have speakers on agenda item 8 as opposed to agenda item 7. I'm going to move agenda item 8 forward and take it as agenda item 7 and vice versa. So if we can move on to what will now be agenda item 7, and that is construction of the new highway junction and modifications to a junction at Walker Street, oblique 3 Tons Road, Eastwood, and that's pages 25 to 66 in your papers. And I think I have Mr. Marsh to present this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application is for the construction of a new highway junction and modifications to the facing junction with 3 Tons Road at Walker Street, Eastwood. To put the development in context, Walker Street lies approximately 500 metres to the east of Eastwood Town Centre and is already the subject of a traffic regulation order with double yellow lines and a school keep clear zone. The extent of the order is shown on this slide. The land that would be accessed by the proposed highway junction is allocated for housing development in the Broxtowe Borough Council Part 2 local plan and is identified on this slide. The housing site was formerly the site of Eastwood Comprehensive School and Lincroft Primary School, with Lincroft Primary School having been replaced by a new primary school on land to the north of Walker Street. The housing site is on 3 Plateau and would require more than 1 point of access. 3 items are identified by yellow stars on this slide. There is a policy requirement for attractive and usable walking and cycling links through the site, and that a site of 0.4 hectares is to be provided as a community hub, including a health facility. In addition, the local plan sets out an aspiration that the housing site will be accessed from Lincroft and from Wellington Place. The local plan includes an indicative distribution of land uses within the housing site, as detailed on this slide. The plan shows the area where the community hub, including a health facility, is to be provided. The area shown pink covers an area of 1.1 hectares, and the 0.4 hectare community hub would need to be provided within it. Although an application for a junction will often form part of a detailed residential scheme, the County Council has secured funding from Homes England to assist in the early development of housing sites. Planning permission is sought to create a highway junction to adoptable standards, suitable in terms of its design to serve up to 150 dwellings. A 1.45 hectare area that would be accessed has been assessed as suitable to accommodate approximately 90 dwellings. In order to achieve satisfactory visibility displays, the junction is proposed to be formed at the southern end of the frontage to Walker Street, almost opposite the junction with 3 Tons Road. The sycamore tree, which has been assessed as not being worthy of retention, would be removed. The geometry of the proposed junction would be satisfactory for the scale of development that would come forward in a separate planning application to be submitted to Broxtowe Borough Council. Modifications to the 3 Tons Road junction, narrowing the carriageway and widening the footway, are proposed as part of this application and are shown on this slide. Broxtowe Borough Council does not object to the principle of an access road into the higher tier of the housing allocation, but points to key development requirements, including an aspiration that access via a reconfigured Wellington Place would offer better linkages to Eastwood Town Centre. The Council referred to the need for there to be one access into the site from Wellington Place and one from Lincroft for development of the housing site to be fully compliant with Broxtowe Local Plan Policy 6.1. However, the key development aspiration that the site is accessed from Wellington Place is not part of the policy wording. That does not exclude alternative or additional points of vehicular access, so long as proposals do not prejudice delivery of the development set out in the local plan.
Although the proposed junction would be an alternative means by which to serve the future residential development, the County Planning Authority is satisfied that the proposed access would not prejudice the provision of a community hub access from Nottingham Road, or the provision of pedestrian and cycle routes between the housing site and Eastwood Town Centre via Wellington Place, to deliver the holistic development opportunity identified by the Borough Council. Eastwood Town Council point to other proposals, and Councillor Tony Harper has specifically referenced a leisure centre which may come forward on the land that will be accessed by the proposed junction. Although the Town Council refer to working on their neighbourhood plan, such a plan would need to be consistent with Broxtow's local plan. Should a proposal for a leisure centre come forward, Broxtow Borough Council would need to determine whether the application would be a departure from that plan. Eastwood Town Council object to an increase in traffic and amenity impacts. The proposed development is for a highway junction, not for a specific proposal for residential development. In determining the application, consideration needs to be given to whether this application would have a detrimental impact on highway safety, as well as being generally satisfied that the junction layout would be of suitable geometry and provided with visibility displays. The detailed traffic impacts of any future housing development would be considered in the determination of an application which follows, and this is referenced in the response received from Highways Development Control. The Walker Street highway frontage is already subject to double yellow lines, and residential amenity from future development would not be unacceptably eroded through on-street parking in proximity to the junction. Whatever development takes place on the land to be accessed by the junction, it should be provided with satisfactory parking and would be assessed by Highways Development Control when considering that future application. The realignment of traffic and provision of a widened footway adjacent to 1 3-tons road would not detract from residential amenity. There is a presumption that determination of the planning application should be made in accordance with the provisions of the development plan. A grant of planning permission would not prejudice the local plan policy or the stated key aspirations, nor would it prejudice an ability to develop the site for some other purpose or with an alternative means of access. A different proposal would supersede development that has already been granted or has taken place. It is recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. We have a recommendation. I formally move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yes, Councillor Creamer, I formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. I would ask members if you'll be happy to wait for any questions that you may have clarification from the officer for when we get into general debate, and I'd like to move on to public speaking at this stage. So could I ask Mr. Bogg to read out the public speaking instructions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes, with the exception of Councillor Harper, who, as the local member, will have a maximum of 10 minutes. Notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived by me saying 1 minute. Speakers should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents. Only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in the presentation. These include impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as planning rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. Members of the committee may ask questions for the purposes of clarification. The chairman will invite the relevant officer to respond to any factual matters made by your presentation or subsequent questions. So I'd hand back to the chair to introduce the speakers.
Thank you. So do we have Councillor David Bagshaw from Eastwood Town Council present? Councillor Bagshaw? from officers. Mr. Ford, were we able to contact Councillor Bagshaw to give him access to this meeting?
Just to clarify, Mr. Barker, have you managed to speak to him at all?
No, let me try if I'll see if I can get in contact with him now. Okay, thanks, Keith.
If you'll bear with us, members. Small technical hitch.
Hello. Oh, good morning. Is that Councillor Bagshaw? Hello, Councillor Bagshaw. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right. Good morning. It's Pete Barker, the clerk from the NCC's Planning and Licensing Committee. Sorry, we've had a few. Good morning. We've had a few technical issues, but if you're ready, I have actually just read out the speaking arrangements, so I will just repeat those to you. So if you just bear with me a minute. Okay, so each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes. So your maximum is 3 minutes. I will give you notice when you reach the final minute of your allotted time by me saying 1 minute. You should not introduce any new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents. Only issues relevant to the planning application should be addressed in your presentation. These include the impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. Members of committee may ask you questions for the purposes of clarification, and the chairman will invite the relevant officer to respond to any factual matters raised by your presentation. So sorry for the delay and sorry for any confusion about the connection, but the floor is yours,
Yes.
Councillor Bagshaw.
The floor is mine now.
Yes, indeed.
So I can speak, yeah?
Yes, please.
Right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I would like to make you aware and fully understand that this development is not the best option for the area. This is probably the worst option to the proposed site, and the better and more favourable access would be from Wellington Place, exiting onto Nottingham Road. Walker Street is virtually condensed to a single lane only during a normal day, which already causes major traffic concerns. To accentuate the problem by constructing a roundabout to modify the junction at Walker Street and Three Tons Road to take the majority of traffic from the proposed new estate would be calamitous. It will create a hazard to children, residents and pedestrians. Exiting from Walker Street to Nottingham Road is problematic. It's problematic now, and tailbacks are a regular occurrence. To allow more traffic to compete for exit at this junction, along with the traffic exiting from Plumtree Way, will cause chaos. Finally, this area would provide an ideal site for a new leisure facility for all North Broxtowe residents, and would complement the suggested development for a new library, doctor's surgery, volunteer and citizens advice bureaus, and a fire service facility. This development could jeopardise the enhancement to the town of Eastwood. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bagshaw, and I apologise for the slight hiccup at the beginning there. I take it that you've been able to follow the meeting so far to this stage, even though you weren't actually able to speak initially.
In actual fact, we haven't, because our Virgin line is down. I've tried to go to somewhere else, and theirs is down as well. So we've had a problem anyway to try and get onto the meeting. So thank you for this opportunity, because we didn't think we were going to get there, and I'd actually relayed this to Tony Harper. Hopefully, if we didn't get through, that he could represent us.
Okay, thank you. Well, hopefully your reception is not too bad at the moment, and you'll be able to follow things from here on in.
Thank you very much.
I thank you for your presentation. I'm going to ask members if they have any questions for Councillor Bagshaw for clarification purposes only. No. No questions at this stage, Councillor Bagshaw, but if you'll obviously stay on the line and then you'll be able to follow the debate and the comments from other speakers and any questions of the officers that are presenting.
That's much appreciated.
Thank you. In that case, then, if I can move to David Collins and Richard Brewer, I'm assuming that this is effectively a joint presentation from the two of you as the applicant and agent.
Thank you, Chair. I think Matthew Brewer from NCC Property is going to lead on the presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. I'm sorry, that was David Collins speaking, was it?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, David. I apologise, Matthew. I've got Richard on my notes. I apologise for renaming you. But if I could invite you to speak, and obviously the terms for public speaking have already been announced.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Matthew Brown. I'm a planning and development surveyor, pleased to be acting for Nottinghamshire County Council. I'm speaking obviously in support of this application. A small bit of background to start with. NCC secured some central government funding in order to optimise and release land from the former school site here in Eastwood. The current application is obviously a highways application only, and whilst our application for the use of the subject land will follow later this year, we have engaged with the district planners as to these proposals. At the present time, however, we do now need to progress with the construction of these two junctions, one at Walker Street and one already approved at off Lincroft, in order to utilise the funding package by the end of this year. I have with me today David Collins from Via East Midlands to respond to any technical questions that you may have, but I'm also here to answer any questions about our overall proposals as far as I possibly can. I'm confident that our application is in line with the relevant policies and to the scope of this application, and as I say, I'll be pleased to answer any questions as far as I can to assist.
I'm grateful, Mr. Brower. Thank you. Do members have any questions for Mr. Brower for clarification purposes only? Perhaps one from myself then, if I may, Mr. Brower. We've heard comments from Councillor Bagshaw in relation to the significant concerns that he raises about traffic issues should this junction be erected, and also the fact that the Town Council and possibly Broxtowe Borough Council would prefer a junction from further down. Is it Wellington Place?
Yes, that's right.
The junction that's being proposed, I'd be grateful if you could just maybe outline a little bit why this junction is the preferred option of the applicant, and just clarify whether or not the fact that this junction and the junction higher up at Lincroft, would this preclude at any point an additional junction being put in at Wellington Place, should that be subject to a separate planning application to Broxtowe Borough Council?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The Walker Street solution is the preferred one in principle, because the development of the hub, as far as it has been designed, would be prohibited by taking the main access off or through Wellington Place. That's as long and short as that goes. It's a case of there or no hub. Whilst the hub hasn't actually been designed to the full level of detail yet, the footprint of the building has, and clearly if I was able to share that with you, you'd be able to see the problem. With respect to the slightly more technical question with regards to a further junction. Do you mind if I just pass that over to David Collins, because he's far better placed to answer that than I am?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the junction at Walker Street is designed to access the residential portion on the southern half of the site. And I think just worth clarifying that the need for that junction to access the residential portion on the southern half of the site is due to the topography and inability to create that link from Lincroft to access that residential portion on the southern half of the site. So the site is currently terraced, and there is a very steep embankment between the most northern section accessed off Lincroft and the portion allocated for residential development to the south of that embankment, requiring a separate access for residential development from Walker Street to access that land. So as I understand, the intention here is for that access on Walker Street long term to access residential development within the local plan, with obviously the community hub still to be accessed when that is developed from Wellington Place.
I'm grateful for that clarification. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, my question is on similar lines to your own, but just taking a slightly different angle. And just so I clarify my understanding of the preference for Walker Street rather than Wellington Place, am I correct, given that Councillor Bagshaw talked about the traffic problems on Nottingham Road and queues of traffic, etc., at peak times? So what was the officer's assessment in terms of traffic issues in the area, particularly Nottingham Road? And am I correct to assume that the Walker Street is preferable because that then joins Nottingham Road in a controlled single junction rather than introducing another major junction from the housing development onto Nottingham Road, only perhaps a matter of, I don't know, 100 yards or whatever it is from the Walker Street junction? Basically, have I got that understanding correct?
Yes, the key thing to remember, Walker Street access is intended to access the residential portion of the development on the southern half of the site. So we have engaged with Highways Development Control and discussed the issue of the right turning from Nottingham Road into Walker Street, and a traffic assessment has been undertaken, and Highways Development Control were satisfied that there was sufficient capacity. Also, a road safety audit has been undertaken, and again, from a road safety perspective, that they were satisfied with the proposals as a whole.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Clark?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the speakers for clarification purposes? Mr. Marsh, do you have any observations or comments to make in relation to what's been said by our speakers, either Councillor Bagshaw or Mr. Brower or Mr. Collins? Mr. Marsh?
I think, sorry, Chair. I think the issues have been covered. I don't think it raised any particular new issues. I mean, we are dealing with an application for a new vehicular access onto Walker Street, and we have been mindful of the local plan policy. There is concern that this development should not prejudice the ability to be able to provide access as envisaged in the local plan and provide those strong pedestrian and cycle links through to Eastwood Town Centre, and I can see that could still be achieved with the residential portion of the development being accessed from Walker Street and the proposed community hub being accessed from Wellington Place.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. In that case, if we can move on to Councillor Harper, please. Councillor Harper, you have the luxury of up to 10 minutes. I do stress the up to 10 minutes speaking time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Believe me, I won't need the 10 minutes. I now speak as the divisional member for Eastwood, and I've already stated the lobbying that's been going on. The objections I have received are as follows. It's claimed by local residents that there's poor visibility from the new junction onto Walker Street, which has a high volume of traffic for a residential road of this size. Next to the junction is a proposed junction is a primary school, Lawrence View, which we saw on the diagram, which is right next to it, and could be a danger to the young people whilst attending and leaving school. It's a new school. The original entrance to this school was on Lincroft, which was a quieter road. The new junction will create a staggered crossroads with 3 tons road and the problems that a staggered junction causes. The junction will prejudice a future development by Broxtowe Borough Council, who want to build a new leisure centre where the new junction is proposed. This has taken on a high level of importance with the proposed scaling down of Broxtowe's current leisure centre in Kimberley. Broxtowe Borough Council in their neighbourhood plan have included an access point off Wellington Place, which has already been spoken about, which would be next to the new proposed Eastwood hub instead of this proposed junction on Walker Street. Mr. Bob Charlesworth has complained about poor drainage on Garden Road from this development and has claimed to have seen a badger set on this land, which I have reported to licensing. If anybody knows this area, Walker Street is a very busy residential road leading from several housing estates and is used as a shortcut from the Dovecote to Nottingham Road. Walker Street has curbside parking and is generally a one-lane road where overtaking is very difficult. The junction with Nottingham Road, which is the main shopping street, is often congested and queues are frequent. I'm surprised not to see a representative Broxtowe Borough Council at this application, as they've been really vocal on this subject, but apparently they declined to attend. The leader of Broxtowe Borough Council called this proposal junction madness only last night, but again, he has not attended. We've heard from the leader of Eastwood Town Council here today, Councillor Bagshaw. Eastwood Town Council have continually opposed this junction from its inception, and only last night they unanimously voted to object to the planning, as did the leader of Broxtowe, who is also a member of Eastwood Town Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Mr. Marsh, do you have any comments in relation to Councillor Harper's presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think that the issues which Councillor Harper has raised are addressed in the committee report.
Thank you.
I can't comment on specific points if you would like.
I'll come back if I may. Members, do any members have any questions for clarification purposes? Councillor Harper. I just a question in relation to the comments from Councillor Harper about poor visibility. I don't know who's best to answer that. Mr. Marsh, is that yourself, or can I come back to Mr. Collins? Whoever is most qualified.
Thank you, Chair. Probably myself best to answer on that one. The visibility and obviously the position of the junction has had to be carefully considered to ensure that we achieve the required visibility. The visibility display is shown on the drawings and complies with the required standards in the design guidance, highways design guidance for junctions. So it is compliant, it's not substandard.
Thank you for that. Councillor Clark, I think you have your hand up. Or is that a legacy hand?
Chairman, yes. Again, I just need to, did I understand that Councillor Harper correctly? I'm not looking at the screen, so I'm looking at the agenda paper. he talked about a leisure centre. Broxtowe Borough Council wanted to build a leisure centre where the Walker Street junction is proposed. Have I understood that correctly? Because surely the main question there is who's in control of the land? If the developer is in control of the land, then Broxtowe Borough Council doesn't have a say in building a leisure centre there, surely. So I'm not quite sure what the significance of the potential leisure centre is. Have I understood what Councillor Harper said correctly?
Would you like to respond to that, Councillor Harper? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, it is the land is owned by the county council, and as you rightly say, the county council can virtually do what it likes with it. But this land is included in Broxtowe's neighbourhood plan, and as part of that plan, I understand, is being amended to facilitate a leisure centre. But you're exactly right in what you say. But I've been lobbied to say that this junction in its exact position would stop any future leisure centre being built on that land, as the junction is right on the point where they're hoping to build the leisure centre. And as I said, it has become more important of late because the current leisure centre for North Broxtowe is in Kimberley School, and there are problems with that, and it is being scaled down from September onwards, I understand.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Clark?
Yes, Chairman. I think basically, I suppose my comment to that is, well, a potential leisure centre is not relevant to assessing the junction, but giving permission to the junction doesn't mean it's actually going to get built. I would suggest that that's up to Broxtowe Borough Council to negotiate with the developer as to whether the junction actually gets built or not.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just to ask on, continue from Councillor Clark. As I understand it, rightly or wrong, I just want clarification that it's an aspiration rather than an actual plan. So it's not. So although it's in the plan, it's only an aspiration. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As I say, it suddenly took on a major importance at the moment because of the problems with the current leisure centre. But this was mooted 6 to 9 months ago by the leader of Broxtowe Borough Council that they were hoping to put a leisure centre on that site. And that was before it suddenly became urgent that the other one was being scaled down.
Okay, so that answer your question, Councillor Creamer. So, sorry, just to clarify, Councillor Harper, if I may, there is no leisure centre in Broxtowe's local plan. My understanding is that in Broxtowe's local plan, the site is allocated for residential development with an aspiration for a community hub, but there is no reference to a leisure centre. This is something effectively that is an idea that is developed since the local plan was first agreed. So to pursue a leisure centre would be a departure from the local plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I can speak with confidence because only last year I was chairman of strategic planning in Broxtowe. So it was myself that put together the neighbourhood plan. And when that was put together, there was no mention of a new leisure centre. This has only come about 6 months ago and then was escalated due to the closing of the one in Kimberley. So you're correct. It wasn't in the original plan. But I know Eastwood Town Council and Broxtowe Borough Council at the moment are trying to amend that to taking on board this leisure centre, proposed leisure centre.
Okay, thank you for that. But perhaps I could just clarify a point there. You talked about the closure of Kimberley Leisure Centre. I'm not aware that Kimberley Leisure Centre is closing. I'm aware that the trust which actually owns the leisure centre are currently negotiating with Broxtowe Borough Council to amend the access hours for when the schools can access it and when members of the public can access it. There's no suggestion at this moment in time that it's closing.
No, I didn't say that it was going to close, Chairman, because I know you're on the trustees board of that, so I know you're much more in the know on the Kimberley Leisure Centre than I am. I didn't say it was closing, I said it was being scaled down.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Harper. Members, normally at this point, obviously, we would throw it open for debate and general questions of the officer, or indeed observations. Because of the way in which we're conducting this meeting, I'm going to actually go through members individually. So if you have any questions or observations, when I call your name, if you'd like to articulate them, that would be very helpful, rather than me trying to follow. Rather than me trying to spot hands on the screen. So if alphabetical order, Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen?
On mute.
Half mute. Sorry, I was half dreaming. No, I've got no comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, the one question I did have has actually been covered. It was in connection with the thoughts for a leisure centre, whether it was an actual firm proposition or not. So no further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, any additional questions?
No, Chairman. I think my queries were absolutely answered. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. No actual clarifications needed or questions. Thank you.
Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Chair. Am I correct in thinking that the junction is required in this spot because of the topography of the site, and that if there wasn't a junction at this particular place, they wouldn't be able to access the land for what it's been intended for, housing?
Mr. Marsh, could you help us with that?
Yes, perhaps if I could ask for slide 6 to be shown. Thank you. This slide shows the points of access which are proposed. In the case of the one at the top of the page, the blue arrow, that is an access from Lincroft, which has been approved. That will give access to the lower part of the site, which is being indicated there. There are 3 plateaus on the site. There is one which is, you can see the cursor moving there, and the black dashed line shows a significant break in the topography. There is another one which is further towards Nottingham Road, which is being indicated there, runs through the school site and also through the housing allocation. And then the access, then the land, which the remaining land, which is shown both in red and pink, and the proposed point of access is shown by the blue arrow at the southern end of that Walker Street frontage. The position on the Walker Street frontage, it's needed in that location because of visibility, but it can be provided with appropriate visibility displays. So the land which would be accessed from Walker Street would be the area which is shown both pink and red up to that black dashed line. But because of the topography, there is a need for different points of access. Does that answer your question, Councillor Fielding?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
So just to clarify, if I may, Mr. Marsh, irrespective of what ultimately is built on the lower part of that site, other than perhaps a pedestrian access to the hub from Wellington Place, it would still require an access point up Walker Street. Is that what we're saying? Because of the topography?
Yes, the whole of the site could not be developed from Lincroft alone because of the topography. So it does need a second point of access.
I'm grateful. Thank you for that. Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Henshaw.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yes, we've got you now.
I was muted. Yeah, just a point, Chair, in relation to the local town council, who obviously knows the area and the road and the junction and the problems that they're having now in relation to traffic better than me. I mean, I've got concerns that with the junction being where it is, that the problem will be exacerbated in relation to problems. And I know that NCC Highways don't seem to think that that is the case, but there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy between the highways and the local people who know the area better. So I just want a bit more clarification, because I wouldn't like to make the problem worse. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Marsh, are you able to help us with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, we've been guided by Highways Development Control on the acceptability of that as an access. This application is for a junction, and the adequacy of that as a proposal will come forward in the next application for the development of housing on the site. But the junction itself has been assessed as being of appropriate geometry and with appropriate visibility to serve a residential development considerably larger than that which could be accommodated on the land.
Does that help, Councillor Henshaw?
Well, it does. Sometimes professional officers assess a situation, and the result is possibly different from people that actually live around the area. Who have the local knowledge. So, I mean, I've got to accept what the officer's saying, but I mean, if they're developing 150 dwellings, and that's going to lead to, I don't know how many cars to access that road from that junction, it seems to me that it's going to create a problem rather than solve it, but it may meet the geometric requirements for a junction. So, I'm not clear on it. Thanks anyway for your answer, officer.
Thank you. My understanding is it's something around 200 residential properties that are anticipated in the local plan, Mr. Marsh, but I'm assuming that a number of those would be accessed from Lincroft at the top end of the site, rather than this Walker Street access at the bottom because of the topography.
Yeah.
Can you help us with that, Mr. Marsh?
Yes, Councillor Henshaw mentioned that there being 150 dwellings, the geometry of the junction is one which could accommodate up to 150 dwellings. Yeah. The site has been assessed as being suitable for 90 dwellings, right, accessed from Walker Street. So in terms of, it's not a case of having to step up to the next size of junction. It's well within the design criteria for a junction of that to serve that sort of development. And overall, the local plan allocation is for a development of 200 houses. So that's split between the Lincroft and the Walker Street sites.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. That's very helpful. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Henshaw?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Chair. I know questions for such clarification. However, I have a lot of general observations to make. I was going to wait till I'm up to this discussion, but I think we're doing it this way now.
No, this is the discussion point, Councillor Longden. Yeah. So feel free, whatever you wish to ask about.
Right, thank you. I know this area. I knew the old Victory Club wanted a big fundraising there, and so I took myself up yesterday to have a site visit to refresh myself and had a walk round. And I happen to think this is a very, very tight area for a junction. I'm not happy about this at all. Now, if you look at Plan 3, I'm going to use a engineering expression here. I happen to think it's pictorially wrong, because you got the junction and you got the school. It shows the school is quite a distance away, and it's not. It's very close, that junction, the new junction. And what you're going to have here with 3 Tons Road is you'll love this, a virtual crossroads there. But also, I'd like to point out to members that this is that Walker Street is very narrow. It probably was a cottage at one time, and I don't think this junction is quite in the right place. I think it's going to cause quite a lot of problems in the future. Another site wants to develop, that's not what we are discussing today. But in my opinion, I think we should refer this to another meeting and give those members who can do it, get themselves up there and have a site visit. I know members some travel a long way, but some members are quite close. And I think those that can should go and have a site visit before determining whether this goes ahead or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. I think we have an abundance of maps and plans in front of us. I think you were questioning the accuracy of the plans. Mr. Marsh, can you perhaps talk to us about the plans that are before us, and maybe you can explain the concept of the staggered junction?
Right, I think the one thing to point out on Plan 3, it may be possible to bring up that that on screen. One of the slides shows it quite clearly, which is the final slide in the presentation. One of my colleagues is sorting that out. In order to achieve the visibility, the northward visibility, there will be a need to take some additional land into the highway. So part of that existing old school site would need to be included within the highway. The problem, or the issue which has been identified around the virtual crossroads has been identified as an issue, and that is why the modifications to the southern side of the 3 Tons Road junction are being proposed. And it was mentioned in the applicant's presentation that the development has been subject to a highway safety audit. On Walker Street itself, Walker Street is already the subject of double yellow lines. Those were, I think there was a wider highway scheme, but restricted parking was introduced as part of the redevelopment, relocation of the Lincroft School to what is now the Lawrence View Primary School. And where the text is on Plan 3, it does, that is the point of vehicular access. Just below the word nursery, that is the point of vehicular access into the primary school.
We're looking at a different plan in front of us.
Which one? Is it the page 60 plan?
The plan which is on page 3. The slide.
Oh, right.
The lovely tree.
So the slide which you can see there, where the word nursery is, that is the point of the vehicular access into the Lawrence View Primary School. And we have a slide which shows the traffic regulation order.
Yeah.
Which is slide 3.
Plan 3.
So, slide 3, which we'll get up on screen for you. This is the existing traffic regulation orders in the area. All double yellow lines where you can see the yellow markings with a school keep clear at the school entrance.
Thank you. So,
Are there any further points that require clarification?
in terms of distance from the proposed new junction at Walker Street to the school access, are you able to give us an idea of that in yardage?
Well, the splay is shown on the plan, is shown as a 2.4 by 54 metre splay. The centre point of that access, it ends at the school entrance. So we are talking the order of 50 metres.
Thank you. Councillor Longden, I have your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or were you wishing to ask something else?
It's just to, as I was saying earlier, I've been looking at the photos from yesterday while I've been reading this agenda. But even photographs on pages 56, 57, they don't exactly show they show that it's got a lot of space, a lot of room. But it's not. It's a very narrow. Walk is extremely narrow, and this is going to cause, in my opinion, will cause problems for us in the future if this junction goes ahead. It is a very tight area. The space we're going to put is very, very tight. And I would repeat that I think some members are really going to have a site visit, them that can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. Well, we're currently debating and the item in front of us today. In fairness, papers have been out for a week now. I've had no approaches for site visits prior to this moment in time. We can't adjourn a meeting halfway through to go and have a site visit.
Oh, I don't know.
It's not proposed one anyway, is it?
I think we have a number of plans before us, and the distances have been described by Mr. Marsh, and they are from the junction. You have the junction with Percy Street onto Walker Street. You've got the proposed junction, which is much further down for the application that we are looking to determine today. And of course, you have the 3 Tons Road junction before that. Mr. Marsh, is there anything else you'd wish to say about the staggered aspect of this junction?
Well, the proposed location of the new junction in relation to 3 Tons Road, the issue around that has been recognised, and there are junction improvements proposed to, I suppose, straighten up the relationship between those 2 junctions. But from a highways perspective, we're advised that that is acceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh.
Thank you.
I take it that Councillor Madden has still not joined us.
Hello, Chair. Chair, sorry, just to let you know, we have still been trying to get in touch with her, but it seems to be a problem with the internet connection at her, and so I'm not convinced she'll be in the meeting today. So she'll give us apologies if she doesn't manage to join.
I'm grateful, Mr. Ford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got. You can hear me, yeah?
Very faintly.
I don't know which keys to press, so I'll just shout at you. My question was similar to Councillor Fielding, so I'm fairly comfortable now with the officer's answers in respect to the topography. The only thing I'm still unsure about is why the access from Wellington Place would not be suitable, because again, the building is not there yet, as I understand it. So can officers just clarify for me once more why it wouldn't be possible to come in from Wellington Place? I think that was to do with the hub, but I'm just double checking I've understood it correctly.
From a planning point of view, we're not saying that an access could not come in from Wellington Place. The planning application which we have before us is an application for a junction onto Walker Street. What we do need to be mindful of is what is in the local plan, And on slide there is a slide 5, I think slide 5 of the presentation, which we have the policy in full from the Broxtowe local plan, which is it's a new plan. It was adopted in 2019. There are 3 things which we've flagged here. The items in the blue box are the plan policy requirement, and that requires the provision of attractive and usable walking and cycling links through the site, and a 0.4 hectare site in the southwest corner of the allocation for a new community hub and health facility, including a health facility. And one of the aspirations, so it isn't part of the plan policy, is to provide vehicular access from Lincroft and from Wellington Place. So that is an aspiration, not a requirement.
But what we're saying then, in essence, is that because this hub development, albeit an aspiration, is within the local plan and the leisure centre is not, our approach to this has been to give consideration to that which is in the plan rather than that which is not.
It's whether or not a grant of planning permission would prejudice an ability to deliver what is in the local plan.
No, that's fine. That answers the questions about the 2 aspirations, one of which is already recorded and one of which is, I think Councillor Harper said, quite recent. So no, I'm happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Walker.
No comment, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Wetton. Councillor Wetton. Can you hear me? Councillor Wetton.
Am I on?
Here.
Mr. Ford, is Councillor Wetton still with us?
He's still on the line as far as I can see. It looks like his camera's off and he's muted his microphone at the minute. I can try giving him a ring, Councillor Barnfather. Is that the last member you are waiting
It's the
to
last
hear
member,
from?
and he does need to be present. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll just hold things in abeyance for a moment, if you will, and then I do have some hands raised, and I'll come back to those hands in just a moment. Any joy, Mr. Ford?
Hello, Councillor Barnfather. I've just spoken to Councillor Wetton. He's having a bit of a problem where he's not getting the toolbar. He has said that all his questions are being asked already anyway, so he's happy for it to move on. So.
I'm grateful for that, Mr. Ford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I do have some hands raised, so in no particular order, but as they appear on my screen. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, picking up on Councillor Longdon's point about Walker Street being narrow, One of the biggest worries that I think everyone has in an application like this is the safety and visibility of vehicles and pedestrians crossing there, but also driving in and exiting. Now, I think one of the officers did touch on this earlier on, but I just really want confirmation, because I'm obviously only looking at the yellow sheet here. Is there the yellow line, no parking, double yellow line stretching post?
We've got a lot of interference on the line,
Okay.
Councillor, but we're not hearing.
I just need confirmation, really, that between the proposed new junction and the school and in the other direction, are they double yellow lines? And I assume they're enforceable. And also, looking at the Plan 3 again, it seems clear to me, no pun intended, that there is the visibility display is there, which is the dotted line, which in effect gives a straight line view. Well, that's my understanding. Is my interpretation of that correct? That there would be if it's double yellow lines along that road there, that visibility display is in effect straight lining, for want of a better expression. Am I right in my understanding of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Mr. Marsh, are you best qualified to answer that, or Mr. Collins?
I'm happy to. That is correct. That's my understanding. Yeah, and they are double yellow lines with no waiting at any time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just that as you listen to the debate and sort of other queries crop up, and I'm just wanting to seek assurance from the officers regarding the traffic, because obviously this is a very important application and there is a clear potential impact for local residents, and it's only right that we give it proper consideration and are satisfied that we're not going to create more problems. So just carrying on from previous questions, I suppose the one question that I had in my mind, a further question regarding traffic, is from the officer's point of view, when in assessing the traffic, have they or what happens at peak times on Walker Street anyway at the moment, or at least if it was normal times, not COVID times, but normal times, is the traffic backed up from the Nottingham Road junction up Walker Street, and is this junction going to create further congestion, or what are the traffic assessments and implications for the traffic on Walker Street? I'm assuming that's about 100 yards or so, is it, to Nottingham Road? So what happens in that 100 yards?
Thank you. Perhaps I might be best placed to answer that. Just with regards to the assessments that have taken place in the process of determining the appropriate location of the junction. And as part of this, a wider traffic assessment has been undertaken for the whole residential site. And it's important to stress that point, that whilst this is purely an application for the junction, the wider aspiration is that this junction only serves the residential element of that southern part of the site. The wider traffic assessment, and that this was a point of discussion which with Highways Development Control, they were keen to understand the issues of turning movements and the interaction around the Nottingham Road junction. I think the key thing to bear in mind is that this access is serving a maximum of 90 dwellings, which is what is assumed in the traffic assessment. And the level in morning peak and evening peak for 90 dwellings is not particularly high compared to the volume of traffic that travels through here. I think one should bear in mind, obviously, the amount of traffic around school drop-off and pick-up times in comparison is by far in excess of any sort of peak morning, peak afternoon traffic that this junction would serve. And just following on from that point, just on the wider aspiration, there's obviously been a lot of discussion around the Walker Street junction and the potential implications or questions as to why this isn't served from the Wellington Place junction. And I think just important to bear in mind, in the original local plan, it was intended that all of the residential portion of the site would be served from the Lincroft junction, with the intention that Wellington Place would serve the community hub. And in terms of the wider aspirations, that is still the case. However, it was not feasible in the end to serve the residential portion of the site that was south of the dashed line that David Marsh helpfully showed on the plan due to the topography, hence the introduction of the Walker Street junction to serve that portion of the development.
Thank you, Chairman. That's the assurance I was seeking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, so just a quick one came to mind, just a clarification. I'm assuming by the school there's an actual highway speed limit of, well, advisory of 20 miles an hour. If that's the case, I was wondering how far it went, and will that be looked at again in the future? So it's not directly to do with this, but
Mr. Collins, are you best equipped to answer that question?
Yeah, obviously the 20 advisory speed limits have been installed in the vicinity of all schools across Nottinghamshire. It is an advisory speed limit. The speed limit on the road is 30 miles per hour. What I would say is, due to the alignment of the road, and it is not a particularly wide road, speeds along Walker Street, speed is not a particular issue, and is in terms of the advisories, I don't think there's no intention to particularly revise that. There may be a need to, just looking at it on Street View, relocate one of the sign positions just so it doesn't conflict with the junction, but that would still remain in place, the advisory speed limit, and obviously the permanent legal speed limit of 30 miles an hour would remain in place too.
Okay, that's answered it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you, Councillor Creamer.
Thank you.
If I have no further questions from members, I think we've debated this well now. This for some hour 20 minutes. We have to remember that we are here to determine the application that is before us. Whatever the merits of Wellington Place may or may not be, that isn't the application that is before us. I think we've heard from officers in relation to the difficulties with this site, with its topography, and certainly if there are 200 or so properties ultimately built on it in accordance with Broxtowe Borough Council's own local plan, then from what I can understand, some 110 of those properties would be accessed by a junction at Lincroft, and 90 properties potentially accessed from the application that we're hearing before us. Whether or not at some point in the future, when a community hub application is submitted to Broxtowe Borough Council, there is an additional access point as part of that application at Wellington Place, is not for us to determine here today. We have to look at the application that's before us on its own merits. Officers have clearly explained in relation to visibility lines and the fact that in their professional opinion, the junction that is being created could take up to 150 properties, when in actual fact it will be being asked to take up to 90 properties. I've already alluded to the topography. I won't go back into that. And just finally, the merits or otherwise of whether or not this site should have a leisure centre situated on it is not before us today. It's not an issue that is in the local plan, and I think Mr. Marsh made the point that the local plan is a new local plan which has only recently been approved and makes no mention of a leisure centre. It may be that because of course things change and evolve all the time, that there may well be discussions at Broxtowe Borough Council on the merits or otherwise of siting a leisure centre as part of or in place of the community hub, but that is not the application that is before us today. So I think we've debated this well, and I think we've covered most of the points that have been raised by any and all of the speakers, in which case I would now like to move to the vote. So in order to make this easier in this virtual setting, I'll ask the clerk to read out members' names alphabetically in order for them to confirm whether they are voting for or against the recommendations or recommendation, or indeed abstaining. Although we will obviously be recording it for the purposes of determining the result of the vote, this is not a recorded vote per se, unless requested to be so. So in that case, Mr. Barker, could I ask you to take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen?
For.
Councillor Barnfather?
For.
Councillor Butler?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Creamer?
For.
Councillor Fielding?
For.
Councillor Henshaw?
Abstaining, Chair.
Councillor Longdon? Councillor Longdon?
I did see him disappear.
I was on mute, I do apologise. I'm abstaining, Chair.
Councillor Taylor?
For.
Councillor Walker?
For.
Councillor Wetton? Councillor Wetton, can you hear me?
Mr. Ford, could I ask you perhaps to make contact with Councillor Wetton again? I think he's able to hear us, but we're not able to hear him. So,
hello. Sorry, Chair. I've got Councillor Wetton on the phone. He's struggling to unmute his microphone again. He's losing the toolbar on the screen, basically. He is able to hear the meeting, so he's listening to everything that's being said. So I'm going to try putting my mobile phone up, so he can cast his vote right now. Just one moment.
Thank you.
Hello, Councillor Wetton. Hello, Councillor Wetton. Yeah, I'm just going to try and put you onto the microphone so you can cast your vote. Just
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you just like to
Yeah,
speak.
sorry about that. I don't know why he's doing this because it's frustrating me. But yeah, I'm for.
Thank you, Councillor Wetton.
It's carried, Chair.
Thank you, members. That application is approved.
Good.
If we can move on then, please, back to the agenda, and we can move on to what is now item 8, but item 7 on your papers, pages 9 to 24. And it's a referral of orders made to extinguish footpath and create replacement in the parish of Mansfield. And I have Mr. Lewis and Ms. Locke to introduce this item. I'm not quite sure which one of you is going to be doing it.
Morning, councillors.
Good morning.
Right, I'm going to be screen sharing, so hopefully you can see. Right, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So today I would like to bring to your attention 2 orders for which I am seeking approval to take before the Planning Inspectorate for confirmation. The 2 orders are the Nottinghamshire County Council Mansfield unregistered footpath between the north-eastern corner of Bradder Way and Mansfield footpath number 17, Extinguishment Order 2019, and the Nottinghamshire County Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And the Nottinghamshire County Council Mansfield footpath number 49, creation and definitive map and statement modification order 2019. Okay, so here is Plan A, showing the proposed extinguishment. SDC trailers require the unregistered footpath to be extinguished to enable them to merge their premises either side of the footpath. Management of this unregistered footpath will also allow SDC trailers to install hardwired connections between the two sites and to ensure that they are secure. The extinguishment order received one objection when the order was on order made consultation, which was made by a member of the public. The main points of the objection are that alternative routes are longer, that there is a lack of street lighting on alternative paths, and that footpath number 17 has a dangerous and slippery surface, and that there's also overgrown vegetation on footpath number 17. Plan B is the creation order, which is being made in replacement to the extinguished footpath. No objections were made to the creation order. The creation order is a concurrent order and will not be confirmed if the extinguishment order is not successful. In the hope of addressing concerns raised in the objection, SDC trailers have agreed to fund the resurfacing, vegetation removal and installation of street lighting between points A to B on Plan C. Points C to D show the alignment of the footpath creation. SDC trailers will be funding the construction of the path, which will have a tarmac surface, street lighting, and a width of 2 meters. The creation path will add approximately 2 minutes onto the journey for those who are currently using the unregistered footpath, and that's just from the northern side where A is through to B, obviously following on to C to D. Okay. Plan D. Plan D shows all the surfacing works to be carried out by SDC trailers and NCC, and this is to improve and regenerate the well-used paths in the area. You will see that between the two railway bridges, footpath number 43 and the unrecorded footpath north of the railway line will be resurfaced with encroaching vegetation removed. Street lighting will be installed between the two railway bridges and on the newly created footpath, both marked up in blue. In green, you will see a future proposed surfacing project marked up, for which Neil Lewis has asked for Section 106 contribution from a nearby housing development. Okay. Plan E. Plan E shows the alternative routes available for members of the public to use, should the extinguishment order be confirmed. From Sheep Bridge Lane, which is down here, there is the option to use the disused railway line, which is along here, and which brings the public out onto Quarry Lane. From the town centre, so near Tenter Lane up here, if you can see my arrow, and there'll be the option to use either footpath number 43, which is here, or the more accessible creation footpath number 49, which is here. Footpath 49 has no steps to navigate, so I believe it will be more accessible to the public. To conclude, the proposed changes of the footpath network will see the regeneration of well-used paths, which we hope will encourage further use by the public and improve the environment for the path users after the street lighting has been installed. The recommendation from officers is to send the extinguishment and creation orders before the Planning Inspectorate for confirmation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lott. We have a recommendation. I formally move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer, formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. We have no other speakers on this matter, so members, it's over to you. Do we have any questions, comments, or observations? I'm sorry, I've got Mr. Lewis's hand up, actually.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. We have two statements which we've received from the supporter of the orders, so SDC trailers, and we've also had a statement from an objector, Mr. Cheetham, as well. So I'm happy to read those out if required.
Are they long, Mr. Lewis?
Not too bad. One's longer than the other, but yeah, I'm more than happy to read them through.
Members, on your behalf, I'll ask Mr. Lewis just maybe to summarise the most salient points from those two pieces of those two documents.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so Neil Lewis, Countryside Access Team Manager, morning. From Mr. Cheetham, who's objecting against the extinguishment order, he states that the current regular used, easily accessed, generally weed-free footpath has street lighting. The path parallel to the railway line leading to the new proposed path does not and could be hazardous to pedestrians, especially in winter months. The current route is shorter for me, which I use daily and have done for over 20 years, as have many others, as it's the main and popular route, whereas a new pathway would take longer to reach destinations. The railway path leading to the new proposed pathway often becomes impassable in summer months due to overgrowth. Last year, the railway path became obstructed due to 5-foot high growth. SDC trailers want to join both adjacent sites that they own. This must be a challenge or impossible, as both sites have an approximate 2-metre difference in ground level. They recently had steps crossing the footpath made to facilitate easy access between buildings and locations. My aspiration is for Mansfield to develop businesses, be a better place to live and work for, whilst recognising community needs and retain current footpaths, encouraging exercise and reducing carbon footprints. The next statement is from SDC Trailers. So they're supporters of the order and the applicant of the order to extinguish and create the new path. So SDC Trailers have been operating their trailer manufacturing facility at Mansfield since 1996. They employ 140 personnel at that facility. And they also sustain significant levels of secondary employment in the surrounding area. Take their corporate social responsibilities seriously, including fundraising for local hospital and also Action Mental Health. Towards the end of 2008, they applied for the extinguishment. This was on the back of a purchase of the neighbouring dairy at the side of their current operations. Unfortunately, this site they acquired, even though it was adjacent, there's the unregistered footpath which they want to extinguish in between the two. In the longer term, that they want to bring the two sites together, but of course, as Steph has already alluded to, it will join the two sites and make better management. So they've asked for a extinguishment, a creation order. They've agreed to obviously pay for the cost of the legal fees and the cost of the physical works as well. They've had direct contact with the objector, Mr. Cheetham, some very courteous email exchanges, and they've taken into account some of the issues which Mr. Cheetham addressed, and they, including the lighting, they continue to want to work with the County Council, and they remain committed to sustaining and growing their manufacturing and repair operations in Mansfield. That was a summary, Chair. It wasn't verbatim.
But thank you, Mr. Lewis. I'm grateful for that. Okay, members, I have some hands up, so I'm going to go to the hands before I go through the list of names. I've got Councillor Butler.
You sit there. You've got your tail on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it was just a point of clarification from the officer just now. Just as he was saying something, I had a bit of sound distortion and I missed something he said. When did SDC start this process to apply for this? It sounded like he said 2008, but that can't be right. I just couldn't quite hear it.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. It was 2008. It was December 2008. Obviously, yeah, there's various processes as well as discussions, and it's been pushed through surprisingly very quickly, considering the amount of work which has to go into trying to advertise these orders. And of course, it's going to continue, because if it goes through today to refer to the Planning Inspectorate, you know, there's another period of time, at least 6 months, if possibly not a year, before the planning inspectorate will also look at the case.
Right, okay, that's 12 years, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, when it said 2008, it's actually 2018, so it's not 12 years. I do apologise.
Okay,
yeah, 2018.
That was my sort of initial hearing. So it's 2018 though, so it's 2 years.
It is, yeah.
Right, I know wheels turn slowly, but I thought, goodness me, that. Okay, thank you. I might have some more questions later, Mr. Chairman. We'll let others come in.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I think we were all quite amazed there with the speed with which the extinguishment order had been created there, Mr. Lewis. That's what obviously caused the surprise. I know how long these things do normally take before they come before us. Councillor Clark, I have your hand up. Councillor Clark?
You're on mute.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, what's 10 years between friends? Yeah, my question related to the maintenance of the new pathway. I think Mr. Cheetham, I think it was, who made some comment about overgrown vegetation. I think the issue about lighting has been addressed, but in the recommendation resolved that the order is referred to the planning inspectorate seeking a confirmation. Are we able to include a request that there are some conditions put that the SDC will continue to maintain the new pathway such that there aren't any obstructing vegetation, etc., etc. So it is still clear and usable. Basically, that's the request.
Yes, STC trailers are aware that they have to continue the maintenance of the path. With rights away, we are generally a reactive service, so you know if we do get a complaint, and then the landowners will be approached to actually go and clear the necessary vegetation. I believe the objection was mostly along the railway path, which was footpath 17. A lot of that overgrowing.
Hello. I think we've lost.
I'll continue there, Councillor Clarkson, Chair. I think what Steph is referring to is that there's a lot of vegetation which is coming from the railway line, which is Network Rail's responsibility. So as part of this, and also generally enforcing the encroachment of vegetation, we've been in touch with Network Rail, and we're getting them to remove all of their vegetation down the side of the railway line running adjacent to the path.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Well, thank you, Chairman, but that's fine. But what happens in 5 years' time or whenever it is that the vegetation starts growing again and overgrows the path? Network Rail obviously are very precious about other people going on their land, so it's not easy for anybody else to go and maintain it. So how will we ensure that that footpath along the railway line is still accessible and is maintained properly?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We'll still continue to liaise with them and contact them if there's any encroachment from their vegetation. If it gets to a stage where they ignore us, then we have a legal process to go through where we can serve notice on them. And if they don't do that legal notice, then we can do the work ourselves. But fair point, and I understand where you're coming from about a live railway line. But we could do the encroachment of the path from the actual footpath itself, and then we'd charge them for it, as well as all the admin costs which goes with it.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Clark?
Well, it does, but I know from experience from dealing with other issues at the railway line, in actual fact, Network Rail is exempt from being charged for work, and that chargeable act apparently is unenforceable because Network Rail can't be forced to do the work, or at least they can't be charged if somebody else has to do the work. Apparently it's a peculiarity of Network Rail alone and nobody else.
Do you have any comment, Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, it's not something I've come across personally, and to be fair, when we've contacted Network Rail directly where it involves a public right of way, they have removed the vegetation. We work quite closely with Network Rail, sometimes where they're trying to close a public right-of-way or divert a public right-of-way across the railway line. And I've got various contacts within the organisation, but yeah, you know, I can see the points, but we'll continue to press them, and they normally do it upon request.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Councillor Henshaw.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's in SDC's interest to keep the footpath 17 clear, because a lot of the encroachment of vegetation would come from the back of their depot. I know the footpath runs parallel to the railway, so obviously you've got encroachment from Network Rail's land and encroachment from the back of the depot. So if we could make sure that they at least clear the encroaching vegetation from their part, that would go a long way to helping the people that are using the footpath, because this footpath does become virtually impassable during the summer and the growing season. In relation to the lighting that SDC are going to put up, will the lights be of a similar standard to the ones that Nottinghamshire County Council puts in, i.e. the ones that are low energy and reduce light pollution? Thank you.
They will be LED lighting, so I believe it will be to the usual standard.
Can we make sure that there's no light pollution with the proposed fittings?
Can I just add to that, Councillor Henshaw? Yeah, the lighting has been designed by our colleagues in VIA, so the street lighting, so there will be the same spec as any of the other lighting. And yeah, you know, taking on board your comments about lighting and how it works and modern lighting, that'll all be part of it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, can I just say to the vegetation, and yeah, I understand your point about vegetation from SDC. There's not as much on their side, but they're fully aware of that. So yeah, that will be built in.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Chair. I've been read this from the very beginning. I understand members' comments about maintenance, but I think the trailer company wants to bring their two works together, which I think is excellent, because of my background, I've read many times in industry, so I understand their argument on that issue. Also, I'd like to bring members' attention to page 10, the top paragraph. It seems to me there's the DCs are paying all the costs, are bending over backwards to assist us in this altering the footpath. I personally got the impression we are in a win-win situation with this. I've no problem with this whatsoever. I think it's good. It helps them. It helps the industry. And it keeps our costs down, because they seem to be paying for an awful lot. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. Right, I don't have any more hands up, but I'll just go through a list of names. If you have no further questions, then if you could just indicate so. Councillor Allen.
No, thank you.
Councillor Buckler.
No, Mr. Chairman, my queries have been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
No, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Creamer. Councillor Creamer. Wonders of modern technology. Councillor Creamer.
I'm sorry. Back inside. Got a lot of noise in the background.
There's a lot of noise up here all of a sudden.
So, Councillor Creamer, are you back with us?
Yes, I've actually answered it twice. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you've just come through now. Thank you.
Oh, cheers. Yes, no questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Fielding.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
My question about LED lights have been answered, so no, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Henshaw.
No further questions, thanks.
Councillor Longden.
No questions, Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
No, nothing that hasn't already been covered. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
No questions, Chairman.
Councillor Wetton.
No further questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Just one question from me. I'm sorry, Ms. Locke. I think you referred to the extra time difference to either use footpath 43 or 20. Was I right in saying it was 2 minutes longer?
Yes.
Thank you. So if we actually look at the points that were made by the objector, alternative routes are longer. It's by 2 minutes. The street lighting is being addressed as part of the conditions. The dangerous and slippery path surface is also being addressed by SDC, and the overgrown vegetation equally. And in fact, with the additional improvements that's proposed by the rights of way team as part of the normal maintenance project for this year. So out of the 4 objections, certainly 3 of them are being completely addressed, and one of them we have little control over if it's 2 minutes. If there are no further questions, comments or observations from members, I think we'll put this one to the vote. And I'll ask the clerk again, as we have done on the previous item, to read out members' names alphabetically in order to confirm whether you are voting for, against or abstaining on the item. As I say, this is not a recorded vote. So, Mr. Barker, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen? Councillor Barnfather?
4.
Councillor Butler?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Creamer?
4.
Councillor Fielding?
4.
Councillor Harper?
4.
Councillor Henshaw?
4.
Councillor Longden?
4.
Councillor Taylor?
4.
Councillor Walker? 4. Councillor Wetton?
We all experiencing this static.
Yeah.
Somebody's got something switched on.
If everybody has the ability to turn unmute their mics again, I would suggest you mute your mic at this point and just see if we can get to the bottom of what the distortion is. Thank you.
Stop now.
It does.
Yep. So
That's fine. It seems to have gone. So over to you, Chair. Sorry about this.
So sorry, could I just confirm Councillor Wetton's vote? Can you hear me, Councillor Wetton?
I can, yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your phone, Andy.
I think that's unanimously approved. So thank you very much, Ms. Locke and Mr. Lewis. If I can move on to agenda item 9, which is variation of conditions at West Burton Power Station and Bowl Ings Ash Disposal Site in Retford, and that's pages 67 to 124 on your papers. Mr. Marshall, could I ask you to introduce the item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Hopefully, my colleagues will get the slides going in a moment.
Oh. Oops.
There we go. Lovely. Thank you. So yes, this is a Section 73 application seeking to vary conditions of the current planning approval governing ash extraction at the Bowling site at West Burton Power Station. This is an active ash disposal and recovery field. It's located next to the River Trent, neighbouring Lincolnshire and Gainsborough, about 2 kilometres to the northeast. and the small village of Bowl about a kilometre to the west. The adjacent power station, formerly forming part of the A plant, the big coal-fired station, and has the smaller B gas-fired station. These, of course, form a dominant feature in what is a flat landscape. So the Bowlings disposal site is accessed by an internal haul road from the power station. It's bounded by the river on two sides and the railway on its north side. There are areas of wet woodland, which are local wildlife sites, to the side of the site. The drains within the site are also local wildlife sites. There's a public footpath along the river offering views into the site from the south. So PFA, or pulverised fuel ash, is a waste byproduct from the coal combustion at West Burton. Historically, it has been disposed at Bowlings in 3 different areas. The largest stockpile is within phase 3 to the north, and that rises up to about 20 metres in height. That's been restored and it's grassed over and has tree planting on it. The permission for the site allows PFA material to be reclaimed again as a secondary aggregate, and this can be sold to the construction industry. And actually, in more recent times, with the winding down of coal-fired power generation, very little ash has been generated, and the applicant has established quite a successful operation to reclaim the ash and export that off the site for sale to a block manufacturing business. So ash is available for extraction from the phases 1A and 1B2. They wish to work one area at a time, and that's phase 1B2, and that's on the eastern side as shown on the slide, and that's the active phase at this moment. Currently, the approved restoration plans for the site effectively control how much ash can be both tipped and reclaimed. So the first scenario would control the maximum tipping heights which could be created, and this would be historically when the power station was continuously working. The second scenario sets the lower levels at which the ash can be reworked and reclaimed, and it's the second scenario which they're now working to. And 2018 planning permission was granted to lower these levels to release further quantities of PFA. And permission is now being sought to further lower the levels in order to extract a further 1.1 million tonnes of PFA from phase 1B2, taking the total which can be extracted from this phase to 2.6 million tonnes. And the variations specifically relate to the methods of working and the restoration and the aftercare details. The applicant describes that this would be the full extraction from this phase. Rates could potentially double from 200,000 tonnes per annum to possibly 400,000 tonnes per annum if the demand responds from the demand from house building. That could entail a requirement for up to 65 HGVs in and 65 out per working day, and that would be via the existing lorry route, which directs them northwards, and that's onto the A620, and that avoids them travelling south through Sturton-le Steeple. The applicant expects that this would take their current operations into the mid-2020s, after which they will review whether to move extraction over into phase 1A, and that's on the west side. So there's no significant changes to the nature of the operations I'll propose. The changes are to the design of the restoration and its aftercare, and there are updated method statements as to how the ash would be worked, details including how dust, noise and other impacts would be limited, and how visual intrusion to the riverside footpath would be mitigated. In terms of consultations, we've had no objections from the local community or from Bassett Law District Council. We've got no objections from the Environment Agency or Natural England. So the principle of ash disposal and its recovery are already established at this site, and they're governed by a long suite of planning conditions which are monitored by the County Council. The increased level of PFA extraction now being sought is clearly supported in principle by the policies of the Waste Core strategy and also the emerging minerals local plan, notably policy MP5 of that plan, which is a material consideration. And this is always subject to there being no unacceptable environmental, transport or other impacts in the usual way. So PFA is a useful secondary aggregate which can be used in various ways, and it offsets the need for extracting primary minerals. It can result in carbon savings when compared with the extraction of primary materials, and it can make a useful contribution to the sustainability of the construction industry and reducing its environmental impact. The site is in a rural situation. The proposed increased depth of working, but it would not extend the lateral extent of the operation. It would be limited to one phase at a time, and the proposals do not also extend the time period for ash extraction operations. They are currently permitted until 2030. The associated operations there include screening and the loading of HGVs, and they take place in a worked out area of the ash, benefiting from surrounding screening. And the image on that slide shows a very typical layout of the plant there, how it would be employed, and that's where HGVs would be loaded before driving back to the power station and out onto the public highway. The applicant has created a bund along the riverside boundary to screen users of the public footpath there. It might be possible for a while that dozers will be visible on top of the stockpiles as they work the material and bring it down to the processing loading area. But then extraction moves northwards and the restoration of that southern area can be then undertaken. So whilst the operations would still be visible from the footpath, they would be seen very much as a continuation of the current operations. It's a modified landscape there at the moment, and there are appropriate working controls in place to control dust and noise, for example. Turning to the restoration, the proposed restoration design is a further evolution, really, of the current plan. It's not the vision of wet grassland habitats that the Wildlife Trust have sought. Their objection has not been withdrawn or updated. However, amendments have been secured with the agreement and approval of the County Council's ecologist. So they're content with this scheme. Overall, this is a balanced restoration which provides agricultural grazing after use, as well as new ponds, wet grasslands, which tie into the network of drains that run through the site. For various reasons, it won't be fully lowered to its original levels. So the landform proposed shows a gradual rising landform upon which the grazing can take place, and then it will fall back down to the lower wetland area in the middle of the site. And this in turn will sit with the remaining two phases in a modified local landscape setting. once restored, there will be aftercare arrangements in place. In terms of the transport, the operator has the use of rail at this site and has employed rail to transport PFA in the past. However, the current customer does not have the ability to receive rail deliveries. Therefore, it's dependent at the moment on HGVs. As shown on this slide, there's a network of weight limits in the area, and this dictates the routes that lorries are able to take, and they effectively have to turn to the north to leave the site. And the applicant manages HGVs in accordance with this routing and in accordance with an agreement that is with the County Council signed in 1999, and that has an agreed level for an average of no more than 420 two-way HGV movements per day, and that is for the entire power station site. However, that's not a legally binding planning agreement or a planning obligation. The applicant has provided figures to show how over time the total HGV movements have been decreasing, and this is primarily because of the winding down of the coal-fired operations. It explains that the potential increase in HGVs serving the bowlings operations would effectively be offset against this drop in other site traffic. But the numbers do appear to be rising again, and probably led by the bowlings site. The County Council Highways Authority raises no objection to the traffic figures envisaged, as these will still fall below the 1999 levels in that agreement with the County Council. However, there are a number of uncertainties with the future redevelopment of the power station, and both ourselves and the highways officers are now recommending a planning condition to cap the numbers of HGVs serving the bowling site to 65 per day. Indeed, quarries of a similar size and location and rate of output would routinely have such a control. And we feel that such a condition would provide a reasonable safeguard to other communities along the roads used by these lorries and provide a baseline against which any future developments at the site could be considered. The applicant has agreed to this condition, and it is set out as condition number 16 in the schedule of conditions. The rail will be kept under review. Indeed, it should be kept under review as an option. All of the controls and safeguards to protect matters of ecology, local amenity, soils, drainage, they would all be retained and carried forward as part of the updated planning conditions. So, in conclusion, like many quarries and construction sites, I know there's been a temporary cessation of operations here as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown. We understand that customer demand for the material has returned and operations are restarting. This is a site that doesn't raise local complaints and has potential really to deliver an increased supply of a versatile and sustainable secondary aggregate to support the recovery of the construction industry. We believe the proposals clearly accord with the development plan and the emerging policy, and we don't feel it would result in any unacceptable or significantly unacceptable environmental or other impacts. The controls are in place to safeguard that. And we therefore recommend that planning permission be granted under section 73 for the variations sought, and that is subject to the appended conditions, including new condition 16 governing HGV movements. Thank you.
Thank you for that very comprehensive introduction, Mr. Marshall. We have a recommendation. I formally move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer, second the recommendation and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. I'll now open the floor up for debate. At the moment, I have no hands raised, so I'm quite happy to go straight to asking members alphabetically if they have questions. Councillor Taylor was up and then down. Are you waiting until I get to you, Councillor Taylor?
I'll wait until you get to me.
Okay, that's fine. We'll just mix it up a little bit and we'll start with the W's. Councillor Wetton.
No question.
Thank you, Councillor Wetton. Councillor Walker.
No comment.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the vehicle movements and the routing. Although this isn't in my division, it is immediately adjacent. So more or less, as soon as the vehicles are out onto the road network, they're in my division. I'm grateful to officers for having now put in a formal question about vehicle movements. Can you just clarify for me whether there is also a formal condition about the direction and routing? I obviously see references to that as being what their habits are. Is that covered by a formal condition already, or has that also been a gentleman's agreement? Because I can't see routing specifically referenced in this new paper.
Mr. Marshall.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if we can get the slide up again showing the weight restrictions in the area. As I say, these weight restrictions effectively are the rules of the road and prevent HGVs travelling south towards Sturton Steeple in particular. So they are very much limited to permitted routes. So in that respect, a planning condition is not needed. However, note informative number 3, I think it is, on the at the end of the Appendix 1 conditions. There is a note there, note number 3, whereby I hope that covers the matter in terms of that it flags the issue and that the operator needs to obviously ensure that their contractors are aware of that routing restriction and obviously abide by those rules. I understand the applicant carefully monitors adherence to the routing and the compliance of their contractors. Thank you.
I'm happy with that, Chairman, and I'm just grateful to officers for including the other new condition on vehicle movements.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Longden.
No problem with this, Chair. I like the idea of the restoration and agriculture put back, but I have one particular question. Just how much ash was dumped there?
Mr. Marshall, are you able to help us with that?
A lot.
I gather it's a lot, yes.
I don't have the total figure. We're talking millions of tons.
Yeah, I gather. Thought it'd be straight, but I thought I'd ask it anyway.
Yeah.
I have no problem with this plan. It's good.
Okay, thank you.
It's another win-win for us, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. Councillor Henshaw.
I did lose the officer's presentation, but thanks to the good services of the IT department, I've come back. So I've no further questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one again about vehicle movement, just clarification really. It's on paragraph 65, it says currently there is no condition limiting the HG movements on the extant planning permission. Then it goes on to say that there'll be 65 loads per day, but that's 65 in, 65 out, which I assume means 130 movements. And then it goes on to say about the future C plant, and it would peak at 141 in, 141 out, which is 282, but it's still below the 420. Obviously, the railway would be a lot more of a greener option, more environmentally friendly. Is there anything we can do to encourage them to use the railway? Because we seem to have hit a dead end where they're going to look into it, and they may or they may not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. But I think the issue is that the current customer doesn't have access to railways. Should the customer base change, it may well be that that railways would become another option. But at this moment in time, it's not. Is that right, Mr. Marshall?
Yes, that's my understanding. They would like to use the rail if the customer has the equivalent capability to receive those deliveries, and you know, they have the facility there within the power station to load wagons with PFA, but at the moment the customer is a road served facility. So you know, I hear the point that you know, we should encourage sustainable transport. Our waste core strategy certainly seeks to promote sustainable alternative means to deliver waste management. I'm happy to consider whether we could perhaps include an additional informative note to raise this point with the applicant, for example, should members consider that be useful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Marshall. I mean, the application that's before us, I think, specifically states that the current customer does not have that capability or access to a loading or unloading point for railways. So I think an informative note that should the customer base change, that we would perhaps welcome alternative, more sustainable, carbon-friendly means of transport would be appreciated. Are you happy with that, Councillor Hopper?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Chair. I do recall doing a site visit back in 2009, and I think Councillor Walker would have been on that one as well, when they were putting further ash on there, and various people being concerned about the loss of agricultural land. So, as I say, hopefully people will be content with the fact that some of it's going back to that in the fullness of time. I'm just pleased that the vehicular movement issue has been resolved, because it's always been an issue through the villages if things end up going in the wrong direction.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a query. The ash depositing. I mean, it says in the minutes that it's going to be deposited up to 2025. And they can extract at 2030. There's no possibility that that they'll actually finish below that before 2025, and actually then not require the 2030. I'm not all about changing it. I'm just wondering for the future whether it'll actually last as long as 2030. That's all.
Are you able to comment on that, Mr. Marshall?
Yes, the current permission allows the deposition of ash until 2025. That is the worst. Sorry, that is the longest time that the power station probably will be running. Indeed, the power station will probably finish well before 2025. They're phasing out coal now, as you know. The extraction of ash is permitted for a longer period until 2030. So at the moment that's not going to change. They're not trying to change that. Indeed, the current operations may be finished in phase 1B2 well before 2030. However, They do have the option then of going into phase 1A onto the western side. And so potentially they could restore phase 1B2 and move over into phase 1A in the late 2020s up to the 2030 deadline. Hopefully that helps.
It does. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Clark.
No questions, Chairman.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions. It's a very comprehensive and interesting report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Allen.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I've got no hands showing, so we'll, I think, move to the vote as already been pointed out. It's a very comprehensive report and a comprehensive presentation. A relatively simple application before us today. So I'm not going to comment on it. It's quite a self-explanatory report. I think we'll move straight to the vote on this. I'll ask Mr. Barker again to read out members' names alphabetically, and then please indicate whether you're voting for, against, or abstain.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Barnfather.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Fielding.
For.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Henshaw.
Sorry, I was just.
Sorry, Councillor Henshaw.
For.
Councillor Longdon.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Wetton.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much for that. If I can move on to item 10 in that case then, which is the annual report on planning, monitoring and enforcement for the years 2018-19 and 2019-20. And could I ask Mr. Turner, please, to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to update members of planning and monitoring enforcement work carried out during the financial years 2018-2019 and 2019-2020, and also to provide updates regarding enforcement notices served in these periods. Members will have seen the details of enforcement and monitoring work for the report periods details in appendices 1 and 2 of the report, and a resume of the notices served during the report period in appendix 3. I will come to the details of formal notices served in these periods shortly, but ahead of this, in terms of the site monitoring during the report period 2018-19, 458 inspections were carried out. Of these, 386 were to county matter developments and 72 to the County Council's own developments. 170 of the county matter visits were to minerals and waste developments where a fee is chargeable under the Town and Country Planning fees regulations, and these generated an income of £67,490. During the financial year 2019-20, 401 site inspections were carried out. Of these, 394 were to county matter development sites and 7 to the County Council's own development sites. 154 of the county matter visits were made to minerals and waste developments where a fee is chargeable under the fees regulations, and this generated an income of £61,138. 143 complaints were received during the report period 2018-19 and 106 during the period 2019-20. A breakdown of these complaints is detailed in appendices 1 and 2. Members will note over half of the complaints in the year 2018-19 related to development in Bassett Law. The majority of the complaints related to ongoing shale gas developments at Springs Road in Misson and Tinker Lane near Blythe, which were under considerable public scrutiny at the time. These complaints were investigated and the development was found to be essentially compliant with the terms of the planning permission, and where issues were noted, these were taken up with the operator and addressed. The Tinker Lane site is now restored and the Springs Road site is currently in the evaluation stage, with the planning permission being time limited till later this year. The elevated complaints in Newark and Sherwood were related to a combination of sites, but also included a number related to unauthorised waste transfer station in Farnsfield, which I shall come on to below. In the period 2019 to 20, some further complaints were received about the shale gas development in Bassetlaw and the unauthorised waste transfer station in Farnsfield. The Newark figure is also slightly elevated as a result of a generally increased number of sites and also odours allegedly associated with the Staple landfill site. Complaints continue to be investigated in accordance with the local enforcement plan, and details of this are contained within the report. A summary of the notices served is provided in Appendix 3 of the report. In the year 2018-19, 1 temporary stop notice and 4 enforcement notices were served. In the year 2019-20, 1 temporary stop notice, 2 stop notices, 1 enforcement notice and 2 breach condition notices were served. The following sites were subject to enforcement action referenced above. The first site is land at 293 Bowbridge Road in Newark. In early 2015, and without the knowledge of the landowner, waste was deposited on the land at Bowbridge Road, which was a disused and cleared piece of industrial land. The slide shows the waste tipped on the land was primarily at this point in individual bags. The waste was a mixture of partially sorted general waste, but also included some more unpleasant items. The case was taken forward at the time by the Environment Agency, which resulted in the waste deposit being stopped. But for various reasons, the Environment Agency's case could not be taken forward. As a result, the Council served an enforcement notice in May 2018, requiring the waste to be removed. This notice was appealed, and the appeal was subsequently dismissed by the Planning Inspector in April 2019, with the requirements of the enforcement notice being upheld. The waste was not removed within the specified timescales, but was removed in November 2019 after the threat of prosecution proceedings. The land is now subject to a separate planning application for potential redevelopment to housing. The second site relates to the workshop at Cocket Lane in Farnsfield. In April 2018, complaints were received alleging that the land north of Farnsfield Village was in use for waste transfer operations. The photograph was taken in April at the time of the initial complaint, and it was determined that waste transfer was taking place, or the owner claimed that the use was actually aggregate sorting and storage, and that the use itself was lawful. The operator was therefore advised to apply for a lawful development certificate to Newark and Sherwood if they could evidence this. This application was not made within the agreed timescale, and an enforcement notice was served in June 2018. The following slide shows the state of the site at that time. The notice was appealed on various grounds, including that the alleged breach had not taken place, that what was taking place was lawful, and that planning permission should be granted. There were delays in taking the appeal forward due to capacity issues at the Planning Inspectorate, but in this period a number of lawful development certificate applications were made to Newark and Sherwood for aggregate related development, all of which were refused. Pending determination of the appeal, the development continued on site, but in the early summer of 2019, the intensity of the development on the land was seen to increase. The site in early 2018 is shown on the following slide. The activity continued, and the site was also extended further north into the adjoining agricultural land. Additionally, further complaints were received about noise and dust from the ongoing and extended activities on the land. The extended operations can be seen on the subsequent slide. Up until this point, it had been considered the impacts were not severe enough to warrant the service of a stop notice. However, the extended operations resulted in more adverse impact in the locality, and noise data was collected, which indicate that noise levels associated with the ongoing use, primarily waste processing, at that time were above acceptable limits. In response to this intensification of the activity and the adverse impacts linked to this, a stop notice was served requiring processing activity associated with the enforcement notice to cease. Additionally, a temporary stop notice was served on the land onto which the development had extended, requiring all further development on that land to cease. A stop notice and enforcement notice were subsequently served in relation to the extended site, and this required the continuation of the cessation of all activity on that land. Following further negotiations with the agents representing the appellant, they agreed to withdraw the appeal and comply with the terms of the enforcement notices, subject to them being allowed to continue to import and store aggregate on that part of the site, subject to the first notice, and apply for planning permission for this use to Newark and Sherwood District Council. If this application was unsuccessful, they would comply with the final step of the enforcement notices, which was to restore the land back to an agricultural use. Ahead of the application being made to Newark and Sherwood served an enforcement notice requiring the aggregate use to cease. This notice has also been appealed. The determination of this appeal has been delayed due to COVID-19 restrictions, but is now scheduled to be heard at a hearing on the 25th of August. In the interim, the operator has removed all waste materials from the site and also associated processing plant, and only imports and stores aggregate as agreed with the council. They've also restored the majority of the land subject to the second enforcement notice, as can be seen in the slide. Once the appeal against the Newark and Sherwood enforcement notice is decided, this will confirm whether the land will need to be returned to an agricultural use or whether the current use as an aggregate storage operation can continue. And I'll update members on that in subsequent reports. Enforcement action was also taken against land at the Cottam composting site just to the south of Horton. In May 2018, at a routine inspection of the approved composting site, it was discovered that the use of the site had changed to one involving the importation of non-green waste in the form of general mixed timber, and a new office and weighbridge had also been installed, as is seen in the slide. The site was also being used for the import and deposit of waste clothing, mattresses and plastics in bales, as is seen in this slide. The land lies in the open countryside and was not considered to be an appropriate location for a general waste transfer facility, and the operator was requested to cease the activity. Whilst further importation of waste did stop, the waste already on site was not removed. In September 2018, an enforcement notice was served requiring the non-green waste materials to be removed from the land. The notice was not appealed and took effect in November 2018. The waste was not removed within the specified timeframes, although the office, weighbridge and partially erected building were removed. The wood on the site was set alight, we believe by a third party. The landowner was then approached and subsequently gave assurances that the waste would be removed. No further progress was made and prosecution proceedings were commenced. Following the initiation of this process, the waste materials were removed from the land and the requirements of the notice are met, as is seen in this slide. Further action was taken at a location called The Forge on Ilkeston Road in Trowell. In early 2018, the use of the land for the alleged unauthorised waste transfer development was raised with us via complaint. The land lies in the Greenbelt, and investigations into these allegations confirmed that some waste development was taking place. Following the service of a planning contravention notice, the operator agreed to stop the activity, and this was subsequently done. However, in October 2018, further concerns were raised alleging that waste development was again taking place. Investigations confirmed that the waste development had resumed and was now at a greater scale than that which had been observed previously, and now also included non-inert material. The matter was again raised with the operator, but no remedial steps were taken. In light of the issue having been raised before, the resumption of the activity and the location being unsuitable in planning terms, an enforcement notice was served requiring the change of use of land to waste transfer operations and requiring this to cease. The enforcement notice was not appealed, and after discussions with the landowner's agent, the waste materials and associated plant were removed from the land and the notice complied with. A quantity of topsoil which had been imported was retained and was to be used for agricultural improvement, which was considered reasonable given the condition of the land and its use, in any case, would be permitted development. Some of the topsoil has subsequently been used, although recently we've had further reports of waste being taken to the site, but to date, this has been confirmed to be only the storage of plant and other items associated with the building trade. Subsequent site action was taken was at Welbeck Colliery in Meaden Vale. In 2018, complaints were made about HGV traffic importing waste as part of the tip restoration scheme, and alleging that this was accessing the site in contravention of the routing agreement that would be put forward with the planning application, and also outside the permitted hours. Evidence was supported to collect both claims. The slide shows HGV traffic queuing to access the site well before the permitted start time. Due to the impacts and the lack of action after the issue was raised, a temporary stop notice was served requiring routing to be followed and hours to be complied with. The requirements were subsequently met. Members will recall that a planning application to extend the life of the development was due to be determined at around the same time, and it was resolved to grant permission, which included additional controls over HGV movements via a Section 106 agreement. Since this time, these requirements have been followed and no further action has been warranted. The final notices in the report period relate to Besthorpe Quarry. Besthorpe Quarry has been operational for many years, and previously worked areas have now been restored to nature conservation end uses. These areas and those included within the active quarry provide valuable habitat for wildlife, and the current planning permission has controls on the time of year when vegetation can be cleared and requires steps to be taken in accordance with various method statements to ensure that these works are carried out in a manner which, insofar as possible, safeguards wildlife and provides for suitable habitat as works progress. In spring 2019, vegetation was removed from outside the permitted months, and at the time when it was considered, there was a considerable potential for the works to impact on nesting birds. In light of the sensitive ecological nature of the site and the breach which took place, it was considered expedient to serve 2 breach condition notices to ensure that the requirements of the planning permission were met going forward. The site operator has subsequently reviewed their procedures, and all further works have been carried out in accordance with the approved schemes. I'll now touch briefly on some notices served prior to this report period as an update. In summary, we have land at off Sandy Lane has been referred to, where there's a waste transfer station and workshop. This has had a considerable amount of material tipped upon it. The company has gone bust, and the land is now in the ownership of the Crown Estate, and discussions are still ongoing with regards securing some form of resolution to removing the waste from that land. Another notice was served in relation to a waste site at Shire Oaks Road in Worksop. That waste has been removed in part and fire breaks put in. However, it has not been complied with in terms of removing the waste, although a current application for a permit has been submitted to the Environment Agency, which will hopefully free the way up to clear the site. The land at Twitch Farm in Balderton is also subject to ongoing enforcement action by the Environment Agency, which the County Council is assisting with. And finally, the land at Henning Lane was cleared of scrap waste, but this has subsequently been brought back on. A considerable amount of material has been removed recently, and this issue, along with others in the locality directly related to this site, are subject to ongoing investigations. That's the end of the report, and the next update will be reported to members in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, for a very detailed report. It's always good to see the before and after photographs, and I know we've spoken over the last year or two on several of these items. I have a recommendation. I formally move the recommendation, which is on page 132 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer, I'll formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Members, do you have any comments or questions for the officer? Councillor Fielding, you've got your hand up, I think.
Yes, I've unfortunately got 2 sites within the division I represent, particularly the one on Sandy Lane, which of course is now Crown Estate, and it's the effect it has on the community surrounding it. I would commend our officers for all the work that they have done, and the work that they did with Bassett Law District Council on and the Environment Agency on removing some of the stuff from that Sandy Lane site. But it still is an absolute eyesore and a blight on the community. And the difficulty is when the firm has gone bust and it becomes part of the Crown Estate, is getting any further movement on trying to resolve the issue. And it's just, as I say, a horrendous blight on the community.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Councillor Field. I think I've stood with you, and we've actually looked at that site together. I don't know whether you any comment on that at all, Mr. Turner.
I'd absolutely agree. I say it's an unfortunate position to be in. So we are working to try and secure a solution to that, but obviously the complications of the site do make that tricky, to say the least. I believe there have been a couple of inquiries from parties potentially to purchase the land, but they've not come to fruition yet. But obviously any purchase would be on the grounds of securing compliance with the enforcement notice.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Councillor Creamer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to well, thank the officers for the report and the actual work they've actually done. It's very complex, and I'm just wondering, just a general question: is there any sort of national comparators, and if there are, do we compare favourably or not? So I don't know if there even is a comparator on this subject.
I'm not aware that there is any sort of direct comparators. The only thing I can think of is a general recording of notices served by various shire counties, but that doesn't really reflect any patterns, and it will be dependent on what takes place in each of those requisite county areas.
Yeah, so thank you for the answer.
Probably doesn't give you the one you need, but unfortunately,
if there isn't one, there isn't one.
Thanks very much, Mr. Turner. Councillor Creamer. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a procedural query, really. On the yellow pages where the summary of alleged breaches are, in the outcomes column, on most of them, it says notice returned and then goes on to say, when it says notice returned, does that basically mean that the recipient of the notice is accepting that there is something he or she has got to sort out? Or do they sometimes just simply send it back, hoping that will go away?
That's a reference to the planning contravention notices we serve. They are effectively the first action we will take, which is to allow us to establish information relating to the alleged breach of planning control. The recipient of a notice has a period of 21 days in which to respond. And any response in that will obviously inform on how we go forward. It also gives them the opportunity to come forward with a solution to any problem or breach that we've identified. So that indicates that has been returned, and that's what that process is about. That's not formal enforcement action per se, and wouldn't go on as on the enforcement notice register. But obviously that's the first port of call, and that often is a way to secure a resolution, because I think it suddenly elevates the situation for the person receiving it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. I was just curious, really, how it works.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Longden, I wasn't sure if you were waving at me.
Yes, I had to get up and answer the phone. Well, I think it's off the hook, unfortunately. Yes, you just to commend out again, support that, commending out our officers for their hard work and persistence. Because I noticed one of them, of course, was at the forging trowels, which is in my division. We've had problems there, and they've cleared it up extremely well, and now looks like it's going back to agriculture. Again, I commend our officers for their hard work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longden. I've got no other indication. I don't intend to go through the list. I've got no other indications showing at the moment. I'd just like to echo the sentiments that have been expressed by several members and thank the officers, obviously Mr. Turner and your team, for the work that you do on our behalf. I appreciate it's thankless and sometimes it's quite laborious and bureaucratic, but as I say, when you actually look at the photographs of the before and after, it clearly shows what can be achieved with persistence and tenacity. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass that on to members of the team as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turner. I'll put this to the vote. I'm not going to go read through the list of names on this. If anybody is against, please indicate. Other than that, I'll take it that everybody is in favour of receiving the report as it stands. Okay, thank you very much then. If I can move on to item 11, which is the Development Management Progress Report. Mr. Smith, could I ask you to introduce the item, and it's to be found on pages 173 to 180.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's the standard report regarding sets out applications that we've received since the last committee, and also in Appendix B, it sets out the work programme for forthcoming committee meetings. We certainly have quite a lot of applications that are heading for committee in September and October. I'm happy to try and field any questions that members might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I formally move the recommendation in relation to this report, which is on page 174 of your agenda pack. Do I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Creamer, I'll formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Creamer. Do members have any questions, comments, observations for Mr. Smith? No. I'll quickly move to the vote before anybody changes their mind. I think it's been a long meeting this morning. In that case, then I'll just ask members again to indicate that they are in favour of the recommendation in relation to this report, which is on page 174. Again, I'm not going to go through a list of names individually unless anybody speaks out. I'll take it that's unanimously approved. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time and your deliberations this morning. It's been a lengthier meeting than we have had of late, but as always, I do appreciate the thought and time that members put into the applications that are before us. I wish you well, and we'll see you all soon.
Yes,
thank you.
Bye.